Imagine that you're a Canadian citizen who spent the last 20 years doing charity work in North Korea. You've visited the Hermit Kingdom more than 150 times without incident, which is why it's such a shock when one night, out of the blue, you're kidnapped. We mean arrested from your hotel room and accused of being an enemy of the state. Have you ever wondered what are prisons like in North Korea? Well, you're about to find out. This might seem like a far-fetched tale, but believe it or not, this is exactly what happened to a South Korean Canadian pastor who spent 919 days imprisoned in North Korea. His story is terrifying and brutal, but remarkably, he's one of the lucky ones. Many others who have experienced the horrors of North Korean prison firsthand have much darker tales to tell, but we'll get to that. First, let's find out how a Canadian pastor found himself on the wrong side of a tyrannical regime and ended up on the wrong side of a North Korean prison fence. Hyung-soo Lim was born in South Korea and moved to Canada as a young man, where he became a Christian pastor, married, and raised a family. Pastor Lim traveled back to South Korea often to visit his mother, and while there, began doing charity work with the poor just over the border in North Korea. Over the next 20 years, Pastor Lim would travel to North Korea more than 150 times. He was one of the few people in the world who had a special green Nexus-like ID card that allowed him to cross the notoriously difficult border dozens of times without incident. In January 2015, while Pastor Lim was visiting his mother in South Korea, he was contacted by a North Korean tourism official who requested an urgent meeting with him. Pastor Lim was surprised but not concerned, and he knew that when dealing with North Korean government officials, the safest option was just to go along with whatever they said. When Pastor Lim arrived at the border, a government official informed him that this meeting had been moved to a city 17 hours away by car. Pastor Lim knew better than to argue, so he threw his plans for a quick day trip out the window and got into the waiting car, a decision that would come back to haunt him. Shortly after Pastor Lim checked into the hotel room that had been so graciously arranged for him, 6 men armed with handguns rushed into the room, blindfolded him, and hustled him out of the hotel and into the back of a waiting vehicle. Pastor Lim begged the officers to tell him what was happening, where they were taking him, and if he was under arrest, but they ignored his desperate pleas. He was taken to a detention center near Pyongyang and deposited in a prison cell with no explanation. The dark, dank cell had no windows or furniture, just a concrete floor and a moldy toilet and sink. After weeks of interrogation, Pastor Lim finally learned what it was that had landed him in this cell. Apparently, someone in power had caught wind of one of his sermons on YouTube, in which he tells his flock not to treat the ruling Kim family as gods. Apparently, this was enough to have him labeled as an enemy of the state, and he was charged with harming the dignity of the supreme leadership of the country and trying to use religion to destroy the government. As relieved as Pastor Kim was to finally understand why he was here, he knew this was not good news. If found guilty, which, let's face it, he knew he would be, he could face life in a North Korean prison, or worse. After more than a year imprisoned in the small dank cell at the detention center, Pastor Lim realized his only hope was to confess and pray for mercy, otherwise he would die in his cell. In true North Korean form, Pastor Lim's trial was swift and his sentence was brutal. He was quickly proclaimed guilty and initially sentenced to death. Before Pastor Lim could wrap his mind around his impending fate, the judges conferred and, likely swayed by the presence of some Canadian diplomats, they downgraded his sentence to life in a labor prison. Unbelievably, relief washed over Pastor Lim as he realized his life had been spared, but that feeling wouldn't last long. He was about to find out what prison in North Korea is like. Life in North Korea is a bit of a prison sentence in and of itself. The country is so isolated and cut off from the outside world that it's earned the nickname of the Hermit Kingdom. While elite members of the authoritarian ruling class live in outrageous luxury, 40% of the North Korean population is malnourished. Tens of millions of North Korean citizens are trapped in a life of hard labor and extreme poverty, and under the tyrannical rule of Kim Jong-un and his cronies, they have little chance of improving their situation. They can only hope not to get on the wrong side of any power-hungry government officials, lest they find themselves in a true North Korean prison. Kim Jong-un is the all-powerful supreme leader of the so-called Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and he has unlimited control over all aspects of the lives of his citizens. As dictator of the Hermit Kingdom of North Korea, Kim Jong-un also presides over its appalling prison system. While North Korea officially denies the existence of these gulag-like prison camps, numerous reports from North Korean defectors as well as covert investigations into conditions in the country have revealed that not only do these atrocious camps exist, but they might be worse than anyone thought. Pastor Lim's experience in one of these prisons would expose some of the horrifying conditions faced by North Korean prisoners. After his trial, Pastor Lim was immediately whisked from the courtroom and into yet another waiting vehicle. He was forced to keep his head between his knees during the drive so he couldn't see where he was, until they arrived at an imposing concrete and barbed wire building in the middle of nowhere, Pastor Lim's new home, possibly for the rest of his life. Pastor Lim's new cell was hardly an improvement over his last one, but at least now he had a bed with a thin mattress, although he soon found it was infested with cockroaches. The building's tap water was undrinkable and the food was terrible. Rice full of dirt and thin white bread day after day, with a weekly boiled egg as a prized treat. The meager rations were not nearly enough to sustain him through the days of hard labor. Pastor Lim spent hours each day digging holes for apple trees in an orchard. Pastor Lim quickly began to fade away, losing 50 pounds or more than a third of his body weight and developing painful arthritis in his hands from digging in the sometimes frozen dirt. At one point, Pastor Lim was even hospitalized for 2 months before being shipped directly back to prison as soon as he recovered the tiniest bit of strength. Still, Pastor Lim focused on his faith and kept his spirits up as best he could. Over time, he was allowed more privileges, including a Bible and his much-needed blood pressure medication. He was soon allowed some limited contact with his wife, connected with some Canadian officials, and even gave a carefully controlled and government-approved TV interview. Pastor Lim even developed relationships with some of the guards, even helping one of them learn to connect with his teenage son. August 9, 2017 began like any other day. Pastor Lim was digging holes in the orchard when a guard came to him and told him to return to his cells and pack his things. He hardly dared to believe his dreams were coming true, as he was ushered into a hotel conference room full of Canadian and North Korean officials, signed his release papers, and boarded a plane headed for home. After 919 days in a North Korean prison, Pastor Lim was free. As horrifying as his ordeal was, Pastor Lim knows that he was one of the lucky ones. He didn't see a single other prisoner during his time in the North Korean prison, and he suspects that his Canadian citizenship spared him the worst of the harsh treatment experienced by North Korean prisoners. He even says he would consider going back to North Korea if allowed, and that seems insane to us, but to each his own, we guess. Even foreign citizenship isn't always enough to protect someone who finds themselves in a North Korean prison. In June 2017, an American student named Otto Warmbier died after he was found unresponsive in his cell in a North Korean prison. He had been serving a 15-year hard labor sentence for allegedly attempting to leave the country with a propaganda poster. Many others who've witnessed the horrors of a North Korean prison firsthand have much darker stories to tell. A former guard at one of those infamous prisons who defected to South Korea has exposed some of the most horrifying details of what goes on behind the barbed wire gates of a North Korean prison. She explains how the guards were manipulated and brainwashed to look at the prisoners as less than human. They were told that the prisoners were horrible monsters who had committed terrible crimes, though she was later devastated to learn that in many cases their crimes were no worse than foraging for food to feed their starving family or simply just being a Christian. In many cases, multiple generations of entire families were imprisoned together for the crimes of one family member in an effort to weed out the bad seeds. Once the guards could dehumanize the prisoners, they were able to treat them with a new level of brutality. On top of severe starvation and extreme physical labor to the point of collapse, guards would often brutally beat prisoners for the slightest indiscretion. Once, the former guard recalled an entire family, including children, being brutally beaten in retaliation for 2 of their family members escaping. The escapees were later caught and paraded through a crowd of prisoners who were forced to throw stones at the pair before they were publicly executed by beheading. In case you're trying to convince yourself that North Korean prisons couldn't possibly be as bad as the rumors and stories make them sound, you can rest assured that in reality it's actually much worse than we could have imagined. In 2017, the International Bar Association, that's the global professional association of the world's lawyers, so pretty legit, released the findings of their extensive investigation into the Democratic People's Republic of Korea's Kwaliso prison system, and the report is sickening. Seriously, if you're squeamish, you might want to skip ahead about a minute or so. We're not kidding. Okay, so here it goes. Don't say we didn't warn you. According to the IAB's report, these are just a few of the worst atrocities committed in North Korean prisons. The report cites numerous incidents of prisoners being beaten and even executed for hiding food or digging for edible roots in the forests near the camp. There were countless reports of routine public executions of prisoners by hanging, beheading, or firing squad designed to subdue and demoralize the prison population. In one camp alone, a reported 1,500 to 2,000 prisoners, many just children, are starved and overworked to death each year. The report goes on to list many more accounts of similar atrocities at North Korean prisons. If you skip that last bit, we don't blame you. The truth about what prison is like in North Korea is not for the faint of heart. Thomas Bergenthal, one of the 3 judges on the IBA's panel, has a half-century of experience working on human rights cases, and he himself is a childhood survivor of the Auschwitz concentration camp. He has witnessed firsthand some of the worst human rights violations in recent history, and even he was shocked by the brutality of North Korea's prisons. He said, "Conditions in the North Korean prison camps are as terrible or even worse than those I saw and experienced in my youth, in the Nazi camps, and in my long professional career in the human rights field." That's pretty damning, to say the least. As long as Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un maintains absolute control over North Korea and the lives of its people and prisoners, daily life in North Korea will continue to resemble a prison sentence, and those unlucky enough to find themselves behind bars in North Korea will likely face the most inhumane conditions imaginable. Now that you know what prison in North Korea is like, perhaps you'll rethink that summer vacation to Pyongyang. If you thought this video was chilling, then you have to check out how cruel is North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Or maybe you'll like this other video instead. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.